Welcome, everyone. My name is Dr. Laura Cohen, and I'm the Executive Director of the Harry and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Center at Queensborough Community College at the City University of New York in Bayside, Queens. Our mission is to use the lessons of the Holocaust to educate current and future generations about the ramifications of prejudice, racism, and stereotyping. To kick things off, I'd like to introduce the president of Queensborough Community College, Dr. Christine Mangino.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Christine Mangino, president of Queensborough Community College. I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone, especially our distinguished guest, Dr. Lauren Granite, Director of Education in North America at Centropa. Today, we commemorate HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, by remembering the 6 million Jews whose lives were extinguished during the Nazis' genocidal campaign to eliminate Jewish people, culture, and memory from the planet. Today, we pay tribute to those in our community who perished, those who survived, and those who continue to carry those horrific memories deep within them. I am humbled to have met many courageous Holocaust survivors who so bravely and generously share their stories of pain, loss, and will to live under unthinkable circumstances. Many have underscored to me just how vital it is that we educate our students about the corrosive nature of hate left unchecked. We know Holocaust education and the work that we do is a proven way to combat anti-Semitism and intolerance. Because when we find common ground and embrace each other's humanity, we can achieve more. This is why we commemorate HaShoah, and while the purpose of the Queensborough's Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Center to make the lessons of the past relevant today remains vital. Now it is my honor to introduce the Governor of the State of New York, Kathy Hochul.
Hi, I'm Governor Kathy Hochul. Today on Yom HaShoah, I join millions of New Yorkers in honoring Holocaust Remembrance Day. We pause to mourn the millions of lives stolen and vow to never let the forces of hate rise again. Today is a day that demands something from each of us. We must take our righteous anger and our sadness and turn it into action. On this day, we listen to the stories of those who survived and heed the warnings of the devastation that can come when hate is allowed to fester. Because while it may look different today, anti-Semitism continues to rear its ugly head throughout the world, and New York is no exception. In the last 2 years, anti-Semitic incidents in New York City have more than doubled. Last year, the number of statewide anti-Semitic assaults hit its highest point in decades. These are horrifying statistics, and as your governor, I will do everything in my power to protect Jewish New Yorkers. We're investing millions of dollars in a hate and bias prevention unit to tackle hate crimes at the source. We're increasing security at our synagogues, community centers, and religious schools. And I signed the Holocaust Education Bill into law last summer so that every child will learn what never forget truly means. The world's largest Jewish community outside of Israel lives here in New York, including more than 40,000 Holocaust survivors. Many of those who first arrived landed on our shores with fear in their eyes and persecution at their backs, carrying nothing but a hope for a better, safer life. They were drawn to New York, a beacon of bright light, enough to be seen halfway across the globe. Today, the responsibility falls on all of us to ensure that beacon continues to shine ever brighter. So to the survivors and the wonderful organizations supporting them, as well as the entire Jewish community, please know this: you have a partner in me and in New York. We'll always stand with you, and we will never forget.
Thank you so much, Governor, and to Dr. Christine Mangino. I'd like to now introduce New York State Assemblywoman Nili Rosick.
Hi everyone, I'm Assemblywoman Nili Rosick here in Albany. So sorry I can't be with you as we commemorate Yom HaShoah, as we're doing the people's work here. But I wanted to thank everyone at the Kupferberg Holocaust Center for all of the important work that you do on Jewish memory, on preserving Jewish culture and history, and most importantly, your commitment to teaching everyone about the horrors of the Holocaust. Education is our most powerful tool against misinformation, harmful conspiracy theories, and hateful rhetoric. As a legislator, I'm going to do all of the important work hand in hand with you to address these issues and the many issues facing Jews across not just the state, but across the country. As the last generation of survivors diminishes and anti-Semitism continues to rise and become all too common on our streets, in our schools, on our campuses, and in our legislatures, your commitment to this work is so critical. It's probably more crucial than ever before. So I just wanted to share in that and share in the responsibility to bear witness and continually speak out against prejudice, against bigotry, against bias, however and whenever it arises. I know that our partnership will go a very long way in accomplishing all that. So thank you again. Thank you for including me, and I look forward to our continued work together.
We're very grateful to Assemblywoman Rosick. This year's commemoration of Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, occurs on the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which was the largest Jewish armed resistance against the German Nazi forces during World War II. The Nazis began their final quest to liquidate the Warsaw Ghetto and deport its remaining inhabitants starting on April 19th, 1943, which is tomorrow. 700 members of the Jewish Fighting Organization, along with other Jewish civilians, bravely fought back until the Nazis crushed them and reduced the ghetto to rubble less than a month later on May 16th, 1943. In that single month, according to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, at least 7,000 fighters were killed, 7,000 were deported to the Treblinka extermination camp for immediate death, and another 42,000 people were deported to forced labor, as well as the Majdanek concentration camp. Most of that last group of people were subsequently massacred during the November 1943 two-day mass shooting campaign called Operation Harvest Festival. It's nearly impossible to fathom the scale of the Nazis' campaign to eliminate all of European Jewry, along with the millions of other victim groups the Nazis targeted. The memories of their individual lives are frequently referenced by numbers so overwhelming as to be abstract and unthinkable, which is why tonight's program, Preserving Jewish History, Exploring Centropa's Library of Rescued Memories, is so powerful. The organization Centropa was founded in Vienna and Budapest in 2000 with the goal of preserving and disseminating Jewish memory before the Holocaust in Central and Eastern Europe, the Balkans, the Balkan states, and the former Soviet Union. Our guest speaker is Dr. Lauren Granite, Centropa's Director of Education in North America, and tonight she'll discuss how the organization interviewed 1,200 elderly Jewish people in 15 Central and Eastern European countries. They digitized over 25,000 privately held family photographs and personal documents to create websites, multimedia films, traveling exhibitions, educational programs, and illustrated books. Our event this evening is underwritten by the HaShoah and Edna Eisenberg Holocaust Memorial Fund, and it's co-sponsored by the Ray Walpaugh Institute for the Study of the Holocaust, Genocide and Crimes Against Humanity at Western Washington University, the Center for the Study of Genocide and Human Rights at Rutgers University, and the Nancy and David Wolf Holocaust and Humanities Center. Rabbi Eisenberg was a longtime scholar in residence here at the KHC, who wrote as well as curated many of our center's most powerful exhibitions. But his memory is not strictly confined to the past. He's also very much present as the Memorial Fund established in his name also provides supports for the KHC's student interns. The only way we can keep the memory of the Holocaust alive is by making it relevant to young people who know little to nothing about it. Because let's be very clear, and I've said many times, never again is now. Before we begin, I just want to invite you to submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And now it's my honor to introduce our speaker this evening, Dr. Lauren Granite. Dr. Granite is the United States Education Director for Centropa, Historical Institute based in Vienna. She has a PhD from Drew University and her master's degree from the University of Chicago. Before joining Centropa in 2010, Dr. Granite spent more than a dozen years teaching Jewish history to adults, college students, and teens. She builds Centropa's network of schools in North America and designs professional development workshops, seminars, webinars, programs, and teaching tools for educators in the US, Europe, and Israel. Dr. Granite also mentors teachers and designs cross-cultural projects for Centropa's international network of schools. Her latest projects include creating a network of museum educators in the United States and Europe, as well as a project where students in the United States, Europe, and Israel interview and take photographic portraits of refugees in their communities. Dr. Granite, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Cohen and the Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Center for inviting me to be part of this meaningful program. I'm delighted to bring Centropa's resources to a Yom HaShoah commemoration. And I'm going to start by sharing my PowerPoint with you. I want to start by talking to you about preserving Jewish history. This is what Centropa has done. Tonight, what we're going to do, our commemoration, our memory is going to be about telling Jewish stories and remembering something about the various Jewish lives that were lived before the Holocaust, because that was Centropa's mandate. That is what we set out to do. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about how Centropa got started. Maybe I'll show you a little bit of our website. I believe they're putting that in the chat so that you can go to the website. All of the resources that we collected are on the website. We have 3 different websites. We have one in English, one in German, and one in Hungarian, because we did the most interviews in Austria and Hungary. So we're going to, I'm going to talk a little bit about our resources and what we do. And then I'm going to share some stories with you. I thought that would be the best way for a commemorative event. So the first thing I want to talk to you about is our oral history project. And Laura talked a little bit about that earlier. So Centropa was started by our current director, Edward Serrata, and Ed was born in the United States, and in his 30s, in the 1980s, he decided he wanted to become a photojournalist. So he sold the business he had, bought a camera, and moved to Central and Eastern Europe. He was really interested in how Jews were living 40, 50 years after the Holocaust and what the Jewish communities were like. And he was able to, earn a bit of a living, taking photographs, writing stories. He did several ABC News nightlines. But he says that the real stories happened when he put away his photograph and he went home. He was invited home by elderly Jews in small Romanian towns or Bulgarian towns or Hungarian towns or Czech towns. And they'd invite him to their apartments with the wallpaper peeling off the walls. And they'd open their old photo albums and regale him with stories of opera singing uncles and grandfathers who played chess and whatever sort of stories families have, as you talk about when you show and remember your life stories when you're looking at photographs. And then he met 2 young Hungarian women. They were getting master's degrees in history in Budapest. They were in their late 20s. They had young children and toddlers. And they said, our grandfathers did those oral history projects where they talked about their Holocaust experiences, but that's not the only thing that we want our kids to know about them. And so he thought about it, and he had worked with video before with ABC News Nightline, and he didn't like doing that so much, because what he said was, when you do an interview and you later that night at 3 a.m. you wake up and you say, well, I should have asked this question. You can't go back and put it into the video. So he said, okay, I know what we're going to do. And he created an oral history protocol, consulting with professors and experts in oral history from Haifa University and elsewhere. And he had training sessions, and he hired coordinators in 15 Central and Eastern European countries, including the Baltics, the Balkans, former Yugoslavia, Turkey and Greece, and countries of the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, as well as some of the former Soviet Union. And these coordinators worked and trained local people to interview survivors about their entire lives. And they said, tell us your entire life story as you show us your old family photographs. So we have a digital record spanning the Austro-Hungarian Empire through the first decade of the 21st century in Central and Eastern Europe. And this visual record is really quite unique. And we only interviewed people who either returned to their countries or had stayed there, somehow had survived by being there the entire time. Again, we did not use video. We did not focus on the Holocaust. We digitized over 25,000 old family photos. We translated 700 of the interviews. We produced short multimedia films, which I'm going to show you several, at least one of tonight, if not two. And the longest of those films is 30 minutes. We started creating websites where we collect, say, interview excerpts on a particular topic, such as experiences of the survivors we interviewed on the Kindertransport, as one example, or Kristallnacht. And we started doing that because we work with educators, and that's mostly what I do. I work with teachers throughout the United States, and I have colleagues in Europe, and we work with teachers also in Israel. And then finally, we started most recently creating podcasts. So I'm going to take a minute, and you'll let me know if I've not done something accurate here, but I'm going to take a minute to show you our website. Here you go. This is the website, centropa.org, and I believe they put that in the chat so that you can access it. All of these resources are downloadable. And I just kind of want to show you a little bit of what it means to preserve Jewish memory. We originally called this a collection of photographs and biographies, the Library of Rescued Memories. And so this is the photo search database, and you can see you can certainly search by different, you can specify your search very specifically, but you can see the different types of photos that we get. We get a lot of portrait photographs. We have wedding photographs. We, of course, digitize documents. And if you just kept scrolling, you would get down through all of the different photos. It just would continue to reload. And you, of course, certainly can search by country. So if you search, say, Poland, you want to see the photos that we collected from Poland, you could go here, and they will come up hopefully in a minute. Takes a minute. And so you see all the different types of photos. You have groups of young Jews, and of course, young people today have selfies of themselves with their friends. And so when we work with teachers, in particular, students are able to relate to these visual ways of remembering who the Jews were and the diversity of Jewish life. So I just wanted to quickly show you that there are many search features here which you can play around with. I also wanted to show you some of the films in case you're interested in looking, and then we're gonna actually dig into the database a little bit and look at some of the stories. I don't know why this is not clicking. Oh, here we go. So we have, in fact, two types of films. One are we call documentaries, and that these films basically take an event or a geographical area and give a short overview of it. So for example, we have this film. It's a 7-minute film that talks about the changing borders between Central and Eastern Europe. It's narrated by Morley Safer. And these things that are popping up, these are the languages. So you can have it just narrated in English. That's the little narration icon, or you can have it narrated in German, and I think this is Slovakian here, or narrated in English with Slovakian subtitles. Okay. So just so you know what these are, I don't want to take much time with that. And then we have the personal stories, where we take the most compelling stories and create short multimedia films. And each one of our stories starts from the beginning of the survivor's life, and often starts with their parents' story or their grandparents and goes to the end, even our 6-minute films or even our shortest films, as you will see in a bit. And the reason we do that is because we really believe in teaching and talking about survivors or those who perished, their entire life stories, and seeing the humanity, the entire humanity of the person. We recognize, of course, the value of, videos and information that talks about the particular horrors that people live through, but that was not our mandate. We really wanted to focus on the entire expanse of the 20th century, of the Jewish 20th century in Europe, and Central and Eastern Europe in particular. And you certainly can search by region. So if you have family from a certain region, you're interested in our films from a certain region, you can search this way. You can search by topics, such as films about the Kindertransport. The other feature I wanted to show you before we sort of dig into some of the actual stories, which are the real treasure of what Centropa has to offer, are our most recent product, which are podcasts. And I highly recommend these. They're really quite wonderful. They're, as I said, our latest material that we produce. And we have 4 seasons. We have one on Operation Barbarossa from the invasion of Russia on 22nd of June, 1941. We have a series of podcasts on the 9th of November, 1938, experiences of the Jews we interviewed in Vienna in 1938. We have one about our Ukrainian. We interviewed over 200 Ukrainian Jews. And so we have stories from them, and we have Sephardic series on Sephardic Jews. And what I want to show you, I thought I would go to this one, the one from November 1938. I want to show you how it's set up, just so you have a sense. These podcasts are really like audio theater or radio theater from the old days. So there's often an introduction, and here's Ed Serrata, the man who's really responsible for and the founder of Centropa for this remarkable oral history archive. And then what we've done is we've taken excerpts from their interviews. And we have actors, usually from Britain, actors and actresses from Britain, read excerpts. And you can see this one's about 14 minutes long. This one's about 16 minutes long. And you'll hear in the background, you'll hear, maybe a tram sound or the sound of bombs falling, depending on what the story is. So it's really enriched with audio, and they're a wonderful way to really hear these stories told. It's a very different but interesting way to hear the stories told. Okay. There's much to see on the website, but I really didn't want to take too much time with that. I'm going to toggle back now, and I want to talk a little bit about the question then becomes, what do you do with the Library of Rescue Memories? And the answer, of course, is you tell the stories. And so that's what I want to do tonight. I want to take some time to tell stories. If I had more people here, I'd have different people reading some of the interview excerpts. But what I wanted to share with you, the sort of slice of life experiences that are conveyed through our database, and the richness of Jewish life that really becomes apparent, and the complexity of Jewish life that becomes apparent, because there were many types of Jewish cultures, right? There was Ashkenazi culture, there was Sephardic culture, there were wealthy Jews, there were poor Jews, there were traditionally religious and Hasidic Jews, there were assimilated Jews. And I think sometimes we forget about that complexity, and we forget about that richness of Jewish life that was lost, of course, lost not only through the loss of human life, but the loss of the entire cultures. And I thought bringing these stories to today's commemorative event would be appropriate. So I want to start by sharing the story of Teofila Silberine from Krakow, Poland. Teofila, she was born in Krakow. She lived her whole life in Krakow, except for the terrible years she was at Auschwitz and Ravensbrück. She worked in Schindler's factory. And this is a photo of her. And also, I'd like you to just take a minute to look at the photograph, because sometimes we just quickly look at a photograph, but don't take time to study it. And when I ask people what they see when they look at this photograph, they usually think they've seen someone dancing, but that is not the case. And so what I thought I'd do is read her description of this photograph and some of the information she gave us about what it was like for her to grow up and go to school in Krakow. So she says, "This is me in our house yard in Miodowa Street in Krakow. The date written on it is 1939, but I think it was taken earlier in 1937 or 38. I remember these sandals. They were bought in a Delka shop. I loved them. They were the first sandals with straps, very fashionable ones. We lived very comfortably, and at our school, there weren't any poor children. The Hebrew gymnasium was more for the well-off. It was like an automobile show outside our school. There was this one boy, Rot. Apparently, they're in Vienna now. They survived the war. They had a company, Iskra, pencils and crayons, a very rich company. He used to come in a beautiful Chevrolet, I think it was, with a servant in white gloves who used to carry his briefcase. He would carry it into his young master's classroom, put it under the desk, take his coat off, and after lessons come for him. The Libans, 2 sisters, used to come in a carriage with a maidservant in a veil. There were nannies like that in navy blue veils. You addressed nannies like that using the term Schwester. The Libans had quarries in Plaszow. It used to be known as Liban's Hill. That was where the camp was later. On vacation, we used to go to Zakopane and later to Rabka. Pogon Villa was the place was called. Mr. Caden, my father's friend and owner of a spa in Rabka, used to let us have a whole floor, and we went with the cook, the maid, the children's maid, and all our belongings. And there, every year, we had a beautiful place. I think there were 5 rooms up there, a veranda, and there was space to run around. I had a scooter, I had a bicycle, and lots of friends. Father used to come for Saturdays and Sundays and play tennis with Caden, because Caden had his own beautiful villa in the park, a swimming pool, and a tennis court. And he always used to invite us for ice cream. I had a carefree, wonderful childhood. It lasted 14 years. I remember everything most marvelously, most marvelously. I had everything that a child could possibly dream of. And then her world was turned upside down. She's very descriptive. She was one of our most descriptive interviewees, Teofila. In fact, she remembered every place where she lived, and she went to school and the cafe she went to by street number. And so we ended up making a walking tour that you can download and follow if you're ever in Krakow. So one of the things I like to do is contrast Teofila's story here with that of, let me just see, Leontina Arditi, who was born in Sofia, Bulgaria. You can see for this photo here, she's playing the violin. This was taken in 1943, and she had a very different experience. And one of the things, I suggest you do is take a minute to look at this photograph, look how she's standing. It kind of is a nice contrast to the first photo we saw of Miss Silberine. And you'll see in a minute, I think, why I like to contrast these two photographs in particular, in these two stories. So here's what she says about this photograph. This is me playing the violin. The photo was taken in Sofia in 1943. My father, Samuel Moise Arditi, brought me up well. He taught me not to get dead set against anybody and anything. One of his major gestures towards me was that he sold his wedding ring in order to buy me a violin. He felt I had an ear for music. I was only 4 then. The neighbors reproached him for this because, quote, a musician can't make a living for a family, especially if the musician is a girl. My violin teacher was Uncle Kamen, the famous violinist Kamen Popdimitrov, my father's friend from his years in France. In Beit Am, I played the violin in Mario Menashe Bronce's orchestra. We had a wonderful big symphony orchestra. I was small then, and I remember vaguely the famous manifestation of the 24th of May, 1943, when the Jews marched to tell the king not to expel them. I was 14 years old then. I remember I'd put on my red blouse. Suddenly, people who participated in the event started running because there was mounted police scattering them. I was playing in the street. Mom came, collected me, brought me home and said, take off this red blouse. You have chosen a bad moment to wear it, because red was a symbolic color of the communists. That was the first day I heard the word anti-Semites. I heard the anti-Semites battered to death the Jews. I didn't know what it meant. I couldn't even pronounce it. We were 6 Jewish children who studied in the Bulgarian school, but nobody bothered us. Nobody maltreated us. And I'll just stop there. But her interview, what I want to say is she very often in her interview talks about how people got along. And in fact, the Bulgarians did not send the Jews who lived in Bulgaria proper. They did not deport them, despite the king being under pressure from the Nazis to do so. They did, however, deport all of the Jews that they had acquired when the Nazis annexed Thrace and Macedonia and part of Serbia to them. They deported all of those Jews to Treblinka. And the Jews in Sofia, where Leontina Arditi lived, they were deported internally and sent to live in small villages. The men were sent to forced labor, some of which was harsher than others. So here you have a very different experience of the Holocaust, which often, particularly in the United States, I think we don't talk about or share the stories of Sephardic Jews in the Holocaust, although a huge percentage, 80 to 90% of them in the former Yugoslavia and Greece were murdered and wiped out during the Holocaust. Okay, so those are 2 stories that I think are really interesting to connect for people, to share with people, because they're so different. You have a poor woman from Bulgaria who was not in a camp, Her father was in forced labor, but he did come home. And they were deported to a small town where they were basically interned and had limited food, et cetera. But she did not have the harsh experiences that, say, Theophilus Silberine did. And Theophilus Silberine talks about very wealthy Jews, a very wealthy school she was in with wealthy Jews. And this woman lived a pretty poor life. Her father had to sell his wedding ring to get her a violin. Ms. Arditi grew up, she was a professional violinist for a while, and then she became an actress. She had a daughter, and her daughter had 2 daughters herself, and they moved to Israel, as did, I think, about 90% of the Bulgarian Jews after the state of Israel became a reality in 1948. So those are 2 stories, and I hope you've been able to follow them on the screen with me. What I wanted to do was share with you one of our videos, because I think that's it's also a nice way to share the stories. Many of our teachers use the videos in their classes. It's a very nice way to engage younger students, in particular, middle and high school students. So I'm going to exit this for a minute and open up one of the films that I wanted to show you. This is a story of Rosa Rosenstein from Berlin, and there are subtitles which you will be able to see. So I'm not going to say anything more, but one of the things I'm hoping that you get out of today's presentation is really the diversity of Jewish stories and the complexity of what Jewish life was like. Because as Dr. Cohen said earlier, we can talk about the numbers are devastating, but when you talk about the details really reveal the depth of what was lost. Numbers might reveal the breadth of what was lost, and these details reveal the depth of the daily experience of what it was like growing up and being Jewish in Central and Eastern Europe in the early 20th century. So here's the story of Rosa Rosenstein, and you'll see her very particular journey.
Ich wurde 1907 in Berlin geboren. Wir waren eine große Familie. Ich hatte 4 Geschwister, Betty, Erna, Zilli und Arthur. Und wir blieben alle unser Leben lang sehr eng miteinander verbunden. Hier sind wir in Bad Bukow. Wir sind oft Tretboot gefahren und gerudert. Im Sommer war Bad Bukow Jahr für Jahr der Lieblingsplatz der ganzen Familie. Inmitten einer Gruppe jüdischer Freunde sind meine Schwester Betty, mein Verlobter Maximilian Weiß und ich. Michi, so haben wir Maximilian genannt, war von Beruf Schneider und kam aus Ungarn. Kennengelernt haben wir uns so. Ich habe in einem Fabriksgebäude mit großen Fenstern gearbeitet. Und gegenüber war eine Herrenkonfektion. Da saß an der Nähmaschine immer ein gut aussehender junger Mann. Wir haben ständig hin und her gelächelt. Eines Tages kam dann ein Bote mit einer großen Kiste bis oben gefüllt mit Konfekt und sagte, der junge Mann von drüben schickt Ihnen das. So fing alles an. Ja, und dann haben wir 1929 in Berlin geheiratet. Ende der 20er Jahre war Berlin eine Stadt mit Stil. Und hier sind wir auf einer Purimfeier und wie man sieht, waren meine Freunde und ich, wie man heute sagen würde, voll im Trend. Genau in dieser Zeit gründeten Michi und ich unsere Familie. Bessie wurde 1929 geboren und Lili 1933. Beide gingen in einen jüdischen Kindergarten und danach in die jüdische Volksschule. Die Direktorin war schon meine Lehrerin gewesen. Ich brachte in der Früh Bessie und Lili in den Kindergarten. und arbeitete dann zusammen mit meinem Mann in unserer gemeinsamen Schneiderei. Meine Eltern wohnten nur 10 Minuten von uns entfernt. Zu dieser Zeit war alles wunderbar. Doch die Zeiten änderten sich. Deutschland wurde für uns Juden sehr gefährlich. Und so flüchteten wir im September 1939 nach Budapest. Mein Mann hat gesagt, bei uns in Ungarn kann uns nichts passieren. Das war 3 Wochen nach Kriegsbeginn. Meine Familie war bereits nach Palästina geflüchtet und mein Schwager schrieb: Schick die Kinder, schick bitte die Kinder. Wir werden sie so erziehen, als wenn es unsere eigenen wären. Und das haben wir dann auch gemacht. Mein Mann und ich wurden in Budapest verhaftet und interniert. Michi starb 1943 in einem Arbeitslager in der Ukraine. Ich überlebte den Krieg in Budapest. 2 Jahre nachdem ich Michi verloren hatte, heiratete ich Alfred Rosenstein. Zusammen hatten wir einen Sohn, Georg. Georg wurde 1945 geboren und 2 Jahre später sind wir nach Wien in die Heimatstadt meines Mannes gezogen. Sobald es mir möglich war, reiste ich gemeinsam mit Georg zu meinen Töchtern Bessie und Lili nach Israel. Hier bin ich mit Georg und seinen Cousinen in Tel Aviv. Meine Mutter, Bessie und Lili wollten in Israel bleiben. Georg wuchs in Wien auf. Nach der Matura studierte er in Israel Psychologie und nahm den Namen Zwibar David an. Er heiratete und bekam 2 Töchter und einen Sohn. Somit lebte meine ganze Familie in Israel. Ich besuchte sie regelmäßig. Hier bin ich mit meinen Enkeltöchtern, richtigen Sabras.
Von Berlin nach Budapest, von Tel Aviv nach Wien. Rosa Rosenstein hat Geschichte nicht nur erlebt, sondern gelebt. Von der Kaiserzeit bis zur Weimarer Republik. Vom Aufstieg der Nazis bis zum Überleben im belagerten Budapest. Ein neues Leben, beginnend neben dem Erwachsenwerden ihrer Töchter in Israel. Anlässlich ihres 90. Geburtstags. Rosa Rosensteins Familie kam aus der ganzen Welt angereist, um sie zu feiern. Und man feierte sie jährlich bis zum Jahr 2005, in dem sie im Alter von 98 Jahren verstarb.
So that's Rosa Rosenstein. Thank you for your patience. So we visited Krakow, Poland, and heard a little bit about Theophilus Silberine. We visited Sofia, Bulgaria, and learned about Leontina Arditi, the actress. And you learned a little bit about what life was in Weimar, Berlin, and then this woman who sent her children away, right? Lost her first husband in the labor camps. There's a lot of displacement in the stories that we read about, which I think sometimes we forget. People moving to different places, even leaving after the Holocaust, sometimes returning back to the cities where they came from, whether they had survived in Palestine and moved back to Hungary or Austria or wherever it was, sometimes moving back to Vienna, but not really liking it, and then moving elsewhere because they had family in South America, someplace else. There was an enormous amount of displacement that came about as a result of the Holocaust. I mean, that's obvious in many ways, but it happened also in smaller ways that I think we're not always aware of. So I wanted to share a couple of more excerpts with you. And these are 2 excerpts of men, or they were boys at the time. They were talking about their childhood, one from Berlin, Germany, and one from Kisgorosz, Hungary. Hillel Kempler talks about, you'll see here, what they did in their leisure activities. He says, we were a real Berlin family. We often drove around and were always out and about. My father would come too, since his pastry shop was closed on Saturdays. On Sundays, we'd drive down to Wannsee or Grunewald. We'd go to Alexanderplatz, which was really close by. And there were always markets on Alexanderplatz and often circuses. I remember a Zeppelin that landed in Berlin. We were there for that. The whole city was there. The Babylon Cinema was located near Grenadierstrasse on Rosa-Luxemburg Platz, across from the Volksbühne, which is a Berlin theater. I often went to the Babylon to see comedies. They were silent. In winter, I would ice skate on the square in front of the Volksbühne with other kids, and we had good relationships with Gentiles. It didn't matter if someone was Jewish or not. You were accepted. I never heard Jew associated with anything negative from the people on our street. If Hitler hadn't come, we definitely would have stayed in Berlin. And here you can see over on the right, this is a picture of Hillel Kempler on entering first grade with this cone of candy that they give. I think they can, my colleague from Germany says they still give that when students start first grade in Germany. And this is a picture of his family. And I really like talking about sort of comparing his story and his description of his memories of growing up in Berlin with that of Joseph Faludi from Kiskeros, Hungary, because he was Orthodox. Hillel was somewhat observant. Kempler's family was somewhat observant, but Joseph Faludi grew up in an Orthodox community, and you'll see why I think you'll see why I highlighted the two parts of these excerpts. So Mr. Faludi tells us Kiskeros was an Orthodox community. We all had peyot, which is these side locks that we stuck behind our ears. Later, when we got into yeshiva, we wore our peyot out. We had school lessons in the morning and stayed until 6 p.m. with the Melamed, which is the teacher in the primary Jewish school, who taught our Aleph Beis, the Hebrew alphabet, and the Torah, and we learned the Rashi, which was a commentator on the Torah. I met with Yiddish for the first time in Cheder, in this religious school. We didn't speak Yiddish at home. We spoke Hungarian. Families usually spoke Hungarian, but if a problem connected with religion came up, they talk about it in Yiddish, especially those who had studied more. They would even write letters in Yiddish. So the kids didn't really understand the language that the Melamed, the Cheder teacher, taught, only if he also explained it in Hungarian. In the Cheder, you couldn't not study because it was strict. It was quiet during the lessons. Even little 3-year-old kids couldn't stand up or talk. They had to have control, and they did. It was such a natural thing, and we were happy to do it. There was a movie theater in Kiskeros where we didn't really go because movies weren't for Jewish kids. My parents didn't forbid it. It was just normal that it wasn't entertainment for us. Somehow that's how they raised us. There was a movie theater in the Sarvash building where every sort of cultural event would happen. Then there was a house with a stage, and they would hold theater performances just with Jews. Afterwards, there was music, and then the young people would dance with each other. They were Yiddish plays, but presented in Hungarian. So I really love comparing these two, or holding these up side by side, or not really comparing, because one boy in Berlin is going to the movies all the time, and that was just part of his growing up. And this young man felt that, it wasn't what Jews did, right? So we want to try and understand some of the complexity and really see the individuality and the really diverse experience of Jews in the 20th century. These stories really bring that to life, I think, and I hope you're getting that as we look at them. And this is a picture of Joseph Faludi. He's over here all the way on the right here. One of them's, this is his brother, I think, on the right, and he is the one on the left. Then there's one more I'm going to share with you, one more excerpt I wanted to share with you, because many of the excerpts, as you've heard so far, a lot of people tell us, everything was fine. We got along with Gentiles. There really wasn't any problem. Life was good before either the locals started to pick up on the anti-Semitism or the Nazis invaded, whatever the situation was where they were. But this is the story of Sarah Kaplan, who was from Berdichev, Ukraine. And Sarah tells, I think it's really important to remember, again, really highlighting how you can't really paint with one broad brushstroke who the Jews were. And that's, of course, really important because you don't want others, others can easily say, oh, the Jews as a big group, but we want to really humanize them, I think, by telling these stories. Anyway, this is the story. She lived in Ukraine, and of course, in the early 30s, all Ukrainians were living and dying in the great famine, Stalin's famine, and he was literally starving them to death by taking all edible food away from them. So this is how she met her husband. And it's just a reminder that not everyone's life was great or okay, or they had good childhoods before the Nazis entered their country or they came to power. She writes, in the first row from right to left in this photo here that you see here are my mother, Esther Grinberg, my son, Izya Gershman, and my brother, Avram Grinberg. Standing are my first husband, Shunya Gershman, and me. The photo was taken in 1936 in Berdichev. How Shunya and I came together has to do with the Holodomor, which is the Great Famine. Our enormous family gathered every night after synagogue in our dining room, and nearly 24 of us sat around the table for those wonderful dinners. Then came the famine of 1932. Food became scarce, it disappeared, and I began to see dead people just lying on the streets. Just then, my mother's friend's son, Shunya Gershman, arrived from Moscow. When he saw that we were starving, he cried, "Let Sonia come with me, otherwise she'll die here." Mother refused, but Shunya kept coming back and begging her, although I was completely unaware of it. On his last day, Mother blurted out, "You want to take her with you? Then marry her." He instantly agreed. I came home from school and was horrified to learn this. I mean, I was 16 and Shunya was an old man of 21. We were married by our rabbi. I sobbed, and we left for Moscow the following morning by train. When Shunya told his mother, she was aghast, but quickly understood he had actually saved me. She tried to make me feel at home, and she absolutely did not let Shunya sleep in my bedroom. After 8 weeks, Shunya's uncle Gedalia came on a visit from Odessa. He asked me why I looked so sad, and I told him, and he immediately made plans to take me home. He telegraphed my mother, and the next morning we went to the train station. Shunya came running, begging me to stay, but I wouldn't hear of it. When I reached Berdichev, it was clear my mother was practically a walking skeleton, and my younger sister had starved to death. Still, I was happy to be home, and I walked the streets of my beloved Berdichev. She and Shunya actually stayed married and sort of formally, consecrated the marriage, and they had, I think, two children. But he perished, I believe, in a labor camp. I think that's correct. So I think that's about where I should stop in case there are any questions. I wanted just sort of say, I had a few extra things here, but I basically wanted to say that we hope you take advantage of the website and just take a walk back into history, meet these Jews, learn about their stories, really learn about the diversity of experiences that Jews were living before the Holocaust. And the website is here, and I believe they put it in the chat. And this is my contact information. And if you know any teachers in the US who would be interested in using the materials, please have them contact me, because we use our materials. We want to share these stories, right? We really believe that sharing the stories of survivors in their own words is important. And I'm going to end with a quote by one of our interviewees in Novi Sad. She said, I want to get it right here. Oh, Susanna Hacker, a survivor in Novi Sad, Serbia, told Centropa interviewers, "You are the fourth group who has come to our community to interview us, but you are the first to ask how we lived and not just how we died." And I think it's sometimes important to think about how survivors themselves often want to be remembered. And it's sometimes not only with their most vulnerable moments, but also the memories that they carry with them from before the Holocaust. Thank you.
I remember the first time we started talking about your website and all the resources you have, and I was just very overwhelmed with just the overwhelming amount of care and love that you and your colleagues have put together. I first became aware of Edward's work in Bosnia, actually,
Yes.
and the photographs he did there. Can you talk a little bit about, because there are so many resources and you've worked with so many teachers, in the United States and Europe and Israel, are there any different ways that teachers engage and educators engage with the material based on where they live, or depending on the different kinds of students and people that they work and educate?
Oh, thank you for that question. I love talking about the education that we do. Well, in Europe, and I get much of this from my colleagues who run our programs in Europe, they're often more interested in the stories from their own countries, right? They have stories which no one else has, right? So if we have stories from Macedonia, we have stories from Serbia, we have stories from Hungary, there's no one else who's done a project like this. And the landscape of Holocaust education is very different there. In the United States, of course, it's all accessible. It's all sort of fodder for Holocaust education. And there's so many organizations with wonderful, wonderful resources. I find in doing the work is our Sephardic stories are often in demand because it's often not taught, or people don't even know about Sephardic Jews sometimes. So to have actual stories of Jews who survived the Holocaust in the former Yugoslavia or Greece or Turkey is really something that adds, I find. I would say also having the photograph database is really important because students are so visual. I mean, that's the lingua franca of students today, or all of us, if you will. It's images. And so being able to access this material through a photograph first, and then the stories, it can really bring students into the story that way. And then, of course, I think we did 2 or 3 interviews in Israel, but it only was after we started working with Israeli teachers, because we wanted to offer students a couple of films where the survivor had immigrated to Israel. Otherwise, we just wanted them to have something that they could connect to. So we work very hard to listen to the teachers. Every culture is different. Every culture has its own national narrative about the Holocaust. And so we rely on teachers, and we don't provide a curriculum that we train people in, because we rely on teachers and their expertise, and we value teachers' expertise. I want to sort of really highlight that. Teachers know their students, they know their curriculum, and they're creative, and they're experts in their own world. And so we invite them into our website and say, let's partner, and how can we help you find the resources you need? And let's get innovative and create student-directed projects. Thank you for that question.
So just to build on that, my brain is going off in like 2 different directions. And I wanted to ask, what are some challenges? Are you finding challenges now with the increased rhetoric of anti-Semitism and xenophobia that's out there, and the tremendous uptick in Holocaust denial and more so distortion? Do you find that it's more challenging to connect with young people now whose only experiences with the Holocaust might be through what they see on social media, or maybe they don't really have any reference point?
Yeah, I work mostly with teachers and less with the students, but I will say this. There's so many ways to approach anti-Semitism. And I even was speaking to a professor of Holocaust education a few weeks ago, and she sort of even challenged, like, is Holocaust education the antidote to anti-Semitism? Maybe it's not the right way to approach it, but there's so many organizations that head on directly address the anti-Semitism that we're seeing, historical anti-Semitism. And Centropa is a very sort of fits in to anything that's related to the Holocaust in that goal, in that mission. But I like to think of our stories as we have teachers who use our resources to teach Spanish, to teach French, to teach art, to teach civics, to teach English language arts, to teach creative writing, to teach poetry. And I really feel the strength of what we offer in that endeavor is to bring Jewish stories, not even within a historical context, not even within the context of the Holocaust, if that's how it works out best in your project, but just bring Jewish stories to students who may never meet Jews. And increasingly, we're working with teachers in areas that are pretty isolated, like small towns in Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Kansas, rural North and South Carolina, as well as inner city places where many students won't have met Jews. So I'm really of the opinion that Centropa has a very important place in this effort to address anti-Semitism as well as diversity. There's a lot of emphasis on diversity. And this is about bringing Jewish stories to any kind of any kind of lesson or project, because we tell human stories, but these human stories are Jewish stories. So they're very usable in many ways. And I'll just say one more thing, which is we have teachers who look at our, and this is what we learn from listening to teachers. You know, they look at our stories and they say, oh, this is a story of survival. This is a story of hope. This is a story that gets students to question, what does it mean to have a homeland, to have a home? And so because they're so open-ended and we listen to what teachers see, what they think their students will see, and we try and sort of build on that.
We've talked a lot about the challenge of doing this work and the commitment that we feel. Marissa Hollywood, our associate director at the KHCU, has been with the center for a very long time. The challenges of sitting with sort of the gravity, especially in talking about what's happened to Jewish people and other victim groups throughout the Holocaust, often of which these are really horrible histories and experiences. How do you maintain a sense of calm and a sense of safety for yourself in doing this kind of work?
Oh, that's so interesting. For myself, you're asking about myself? Okay. I think because Centropa is, I was teaching Jewish history at a Jewish school, and I discovered Centropa, or Centropa discovered me. And one of the things I loved about it was that we teach Jewish history. You know, we don't really focus on the Holocaust. We fit into, in the United States, we fit into public school curriculum in the Holocaust. And so, but that's not only what we do. And one of our mottos is you can't only teach how Jews were murdered, you have to teach how they lived as well. And that's partly how I stay sane, by bringing these Jewish stories of how they live and pointing out the diversity. I hope that came through in the presentation. I love sharing these snippets because they're not things you hear about when you talk about the Holocaust or what was lost, or certainly the numbers. And they remind us of just the general humanity, you know, siblings fighting together. We have a wonderful photograph of 3 men playing chess, and one of them has a kippah on, and the description of it from the survivor is like, yeah, that's my grandfather, my uncle, and whoever playing chess. My grandfather had a problem because he kept losing money. My grandmother hated for him to play chess because he would gamble it away. You know, again, just these were just people who were living their lives, and there are interesting Jewish aspects of this, and there are human aspects to it. And that's what I think is useful, our contribution.
You've brought up this point before our event started. There's I think it's called Moment Magazine, and they focus on a variety of different themes. They've been running a very interesting Zoom series on the intersection of anti-Semitism and racism. And so there was just an article where they were talking about the challenge of talking about anti-Semitism within Holocaust education. And it's a real interesting thread that I feel like might need to be its own event. I believe her name is Dara Horn. She wrote this book called People Love Dead Jews, or something like that, which makes sense in a way, but is also a very sort of controversial title, and the way to think about what is the role of Holocaust education right now in an environment that is so politicized, where anti-Semitism, you know, for decades in this country, anti-Semitism has existed. But, you know, I think there was also an understanding that we all sort of know what anti-Semitism is, and it's a no-go area. And even for a book like that to come out, for someone who may not necessarily understand what she's really talking about, can be very, very off-putting. I just want to say thank you for talking about Centropa. I mean, it's really been tremendous in the work that you do with teachers and within our field of Holocaust education, and also the work that you do just as a human being on this, and the positivity and sort of the empathy that you bring is also really important, because again, it's really about celebrating people's lives and talking about the complexities. And even when you mention, you know, the idea of leaving home and what does that mean? And, you know, I live in New York City and my life is here. And I sometimes think like, you know, how do different communities of people arrive here? And once they try to settle, what's their connection with the place that they came from? Is it another city? Is it another country? And under what circumstances did they leave? Did they come here to find a new life? Did they come because they needed to? Did they come because they were fleeing? And I think that we often forget about those feelings. And so that's something that came through really in the richness of the documentation that you did with all of the people that you and your colleagues interviewed through the course of this project. So Thank you. Thank you so
thank
much.
you. Thank you for being interested in our work. Really appreciate it.
We're very, very grateful. And thanks to everyone who tuned in this evening for the KHC's Yom HaShoah commemoration. We hope you all stay safe and well, and we will see you soon. Be well.